I'm calling the meeting to order. We do have regrets from Ann Smith and Barb Sear. And yeah, so they're absent. The first thing we're going to do after I've done that is acknowledge the traditional territory.
The land upon which we work, live, and sustain ourselves is the ancestral and treaty lands of the Michizagig Anishinaabe, also known today as the Mississaugas of the Credit, the rightful caretakers and title holders of this land. We also recognize the rich pre-contact history and relationships which include the Anishinaabe and the Ongwe Hongwe.
Since European contact, this land continues to be home to Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. As responsible community members, we value the diversity, dignity, and worth of all people.
Colonialism displaced and dispossessed Indigenous peoples of their ancestral land
and continues to deny their basic human rights, dignities, and freedoms.
We are committed to learning true history to reconcile, make reparations, and fulfill our treaty obligations to the original peoples and our collective responsibilities to the land, water, animals, and each other for future generations.
I like that sentence at the end of that. How does this acknowledgement compel you to take action? Because one of my points about acknowledging the traditional territory is that it be an actual acknowledgement rather than just words. So every time we see it, we have to take in our hearts something, a piece of knowledge, a piece of understanding, a piece of peace and harmony. And yeah, so I encourage everybody, every time you hear one of these, actually pay attention. Take some time to learn about First Nations, to learn about the history that has been suppressed. All right. If a little housekeeping, if you could mute yourself, and then if you want to speak, you just raise your hand, and I am trying to keep an eye on, and I do have help, another set of eyes. So, okay, we're going to move now to the approval of the agenda. We do have one additional item as 8.1. It is correspondence from LDAPR. And I need somebody to motion that the agenda for November 19th, 2024 meeting be approved as and seconded, and all in favor. Great, thank you. Number 4 is the declaration of conflict of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest? No. Wonderful. Number 5 is the approval of the minutes from the last committee meeting of October 15th, 2024. Is there any discussion? Does anybody have any questions or comments with regards to minutes? No? Would somebody like to move for approval of the minutes? Thank you. And do we have a second?
This is Trustee Benjamin online.
Trustee Benjamin.
I wasn't there. I missed that one.
Thank you, Trustee Benjamin. All right. We have no delegations this evening, which is great. And we will move on to the superintendent's oral report, 7.1.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I am pleased to share with you some exciting developments and updates from across the board, including initiatives that reflect our ongoing commitment to supporting student success, accessibility, and community engagement. First, I'm sharing that we have a new lending library created by the PDSB speech and language pathologists. We're excited to announce the creation of a new pilot lending library for speech and language resources developed by our speech and language pathologists, or SLPs. This initiative is a wonderful example of how our dedicated staff is working creatively to address the needs of our students. The vision is to foster language development at home and in the classrooms by offering materials that support students with speech delays or communication challenges. The mission is to provide the tools needed to create a library of toys and activities designed to support and include all students an opportunity to develop communication skills, social interactions, and academic foundations as they engage in positive and responsive interactions with educators. The library or lending library will empower educators to feel confident and purposeful when engaging with students by using suggested resources, strategies to develop their skills, and ideas offered in the lending library. Educators then will be able to generalize these strategies and ideas with their own resources and individualization for students. An educator shared that the lending library, quote, provides the tools needed to create a library of toys and activities designed to support and include all students an opportunity to develop communication skills, social interactions, and academic foundations as they engage in positive and responsive interactions with educators. The lending library empowered me to feel confident and purposeful when engaging with students by using suggested resources, strategies, and ideas offered. So the SLP team has shared how each school can be supported in bringing a lending library to their students and community, and has provided these supports across the system. And in conversation with Superintendent Laura Chabarro, we intend to bring these resources into our Welcome to Kindergarten events happening soon. Next, as a part of the accessibility plan update, as a part of our ongoing commitment to accessibility and inclusion, we held our accessibility advisory committee on November 7th, 2024, with representation from 12 departments in the PDSB. Our agenda included a welcome to new members, an overview of the role of the Accessibility Advisory Committee, a detailed review with feedback from SEAC of the Multidisciplinary Accessibility Plan with a commitment to action and timelines. We also invited, after this meeting, 2 additional departments to future meetings, Innovation and International Programs, and our purchasing departments. Our next meeting has been set for January 2025. Finally, we are also in the process of continuing our pilot program aimed at enhancing the monitoring and accountability of educational programs in our congregated classes, as well as for exceptional learners in the mainstream. This pilot, involving 7 schools, involves a series of strategies in the development of professional learning and resources to track the effectiveness of teaching practices, individualized student goals, and overall program delivery across 6 domains of effective practice. The primary objective is to ensure that we are meeting unique needs of students in congregated settings while fostering an environment of continuous improvement for staff. Through this pilot, we aim to identify best practice, gather valuable feedback, and create systems for regular monitoring at the principal and superintendent level that will help support our students across the system in the long term. More details about the school improvement and equity focus for exceptional learners will be shared in a report today by my superintendent colleague, Laura Chabarro. These initiatives represent just a few of the many efforts underway to enhance the learning experience of all students across the board. We are excited about the progress we are making, and we will continue to be grateful for the ongoing partnership and support of SEAC in helping us meet the diverse needs of our community. I would like to share that I will not be in attendance during the December SEAC meeting as I require ankle surgery. A retired superintendent will be providing coverage for me during my absence, and you'll continue to be supported by this amazing special education team. A reminder that during the next SEAC meeting, as shared in the agenda, our governance officer, Jasmine Burkhapic, will host a SEAC governance training from 6 to 7 here in the boardroom. A separate invitation will be sent to all members. As well, a reminder that next month we will host the annual SEAC elections. Thank you for your ongoing dedication and commitment to supporting students with special education needs. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question.
We're going to take a question from this floor, and then we'll go to Trustee Benjamin.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the Accessibility Advisory Committee, we had talked last month about SEAC being a part of that committee. Is that happened?
Through you, Chair, we just met with the AAC, which is the advisory committee. There's a working committee as well, and we have asked for representation from SEAC on the working committee.
So when will the working committee meeting?
I will ask the lead when that date is, and let SEAC members know so they can make sure that they're available to come.
And the document we reviewed last month, I believe it's been published now, were any new actions added from last year?
So the commitment of the meeting that happened at our meeting on November 7th was that each department was to take back those actions and put down additional actions and timelines and accountability goals on them for our meeting in January.
But this document is due in December, right? The accessibility document is due in.
So there's one part that's due in December that she's already revised. We're continuing to work forward with the other elements of it.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Benjamin?
Thank you. And through you, Chair, thank you for the report, Superintendent Skokakto. I only want to know, where is the location of this new lending library?
So through you, Chair, this was just starting as a small pilot in some schools. I can have coordinating principal Andrea Dewar-Salmon answer where it is now. We started to see how the uptake was, if it was effective in building communication skills. And then we've offered availability across the school system. In fact, the SLP team presented to our central special education team so that we could bring it forward to all schools. But I'll let coordinating principal Andrea Dewar-Salmon share where those schools are.
Through your chair, good evening, everyone. Get closer to the microphone. We are in Castlebrooks and Castle Oak, and Barrel Ford. And then we also learned today that there were other versions in like a earlier stage. But this morning we had the privilege of hearing about the lending library in a more complex, more complete presentation. So these two schools have the lending library in operation. And as our superintendent Sakata said, we're looking to expand and to include parents so that these lending libraries, which are in bins or plastics, will be able to go home with instructions that families can use to interact with students at home as well. Anybody else? Jazz?
I was just gonna ask, is there an opportunity to have digital media too, with like learnings and lessons and like the videos maybe instead of, and is it just in English or in other languages?
Through you, Chair, great question. I can take that back to the team. Anybody else? Would you like to move for receipt of your report, Jesse?
Yeah.
Great. And who would like to say anything? Trustee Quinn? Sorry. Sorry.
Are we gonna get it back on paper again? In our report?
Yes, we had it the last two times, and I think my assistant forgot to copy it today, but I certainly get it back to you. Yeah.
So we're going to move on to 7.2, which is the special education plan with standards 3 and 4.
For you, Chair, I would like to ask coordinating principal Jeff Bertrand to present this report.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. This month we are looking at standards 3 and 4. So standard 3 is roles and responsibilities for special education within our board, and then the number 4 is early identification procedures and intervention strategies. So I'm just going to briefly provide a couple of updates to what you had previously seen. So for standard 3, roles and responsibilities, we will be updating this section to reflect a few new roles. One is an IEP coordinator for K to 21 across the system. That role will be a liaison between our learning technology support services as well as at schools, and then we'll provide professional learning and build capacity amongst educators for the creation and development of IEPs. The other new role is transition navigator resource teachers, and there will be 3 of those hired. That posting should be coming out any day now. So those resource teachers will support transitions into, between schools and out of secondary school. And so we are still working on how we will sort of divide up the workload for those, but we're leaning towards having each of the three specialize in a specific area. And so again, they will be supporting the system K to 21. Both roles are based on continued funding for next year. And so we are going to update them in our plan in hopes that we will get that funding and they will continue for next year. Updates to standard 4. So we need to go back and update standard 4 to reflect early reading screening tools that are currently in use as mandated by the ministry previously. So from grades 1 to 3, outline which screening tools we are using and the results we've seen. And then we need to provide more information around the specific early reading interventions that we are providing to schools and the plan to continue to provide more early reading interventions for school. And then one correction that's already been made on the posted spec ed plan was the inclusion of special education resource teachers in the student review meeting process. That was an oversight on our department that we missed that one. So just a reminder for feedback, you have a couple of options. There's a QR code there if you wanted to use your phone to snap a quick picture that will take you to the link that is always open for feedback, or there is a bit.ly URL there that you can quickly type in so that you are taken directly to the feedback on our special education plan. There's another slide. Hold on. Oh, okay. So you go back one, sorry. Yeah. Some guiding questions as you think about, the changes to the plan and what we're sharing. Just, is the information in our spec ed plan clearly presented, and is it language used accessible, or do we need to keep going back and refining that language? And then what additional information might be helpful for families? So I'll maybe pause there in case there's questions before I talk a little bit about next month's standard review.
Jennifer, go ahead.
I'm just curious as to how you decide which roles are included in the roles and responsibility. I know some boards have anything basically that is under spec ed plan and paid for by under special education paid for is under roles and responsibilities. It looks like you don't have all the different roles listed in here. So just wondering how you decide what belongs in there and what doesn't.
So our goal is to get all of the roles within our department into the plan. And so if we are still missing some, then we'll continue to be updating that and bring that back each time. But maybe Superintendent Gucado can clarify as to whether that's covered by our budget or not, or whether it's just within our department.
Yeah, through you, Chair. If you see a role that you think is missing that we know is in our department, but just a reminder that we have had a shift in moving the social emotional learning team over to safety and well-being department over the summer. So now we're just special education and the social emotional learning team. So all of the social emotional learning resource teachers, CYCPs moved under another superintendent's supervision. Is there something that you are seeing, Jen, that is missing?
Well, ATRTs aren't here. And they're not called that anyway.
So they are called CRTs, and then they would be added to our department as an addition. So that's a great, they're not called that anymore. Yes, we did present that in September. That would be an addition of the CRT, also the CVP. We've had an increase of occupational therapists. We now have a supervisor and moved from 3 to 9 occupational therapists. So those changes would all be reflected in here. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and I just think anything that's referenced in here later on, we have pages where we reference different teachers and things like that. If they're referenced in here, we should really explain what the responsibilities are. So we can find the rest of the document. They should probably be explained here. Thank you.
Roy?
Yeah, through you, Chair. It's a good question. The itinerant teachers, has the role changed or does the name has changed?
Through you, Chair. So we still have itinerant teachers that serve blind, low vision students and deaf, hard of hearing students. And then we did change the role from our special needs itinerants to special programs resource teachers. So there's two different sets of teachers there.
Both roles exist.
Yes.
Jazz, where does orientation mobility fall?
So through you, Chair, orientation mobility is a service we provide. We do not, and I would through contract.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to share, excellent news. I'm not sure if this is widely known, but we were able through, an increased partnership with the CNIB and a meeting that we've had with them recently, to, have them support us in finding an orientation and mobility specialist that is going to start, taking caseloads immediately.
Fantastic news.
Yes, I did. We jumped. I might have cried a little bit. I was so
Yeah.
happy.
But so it would not be in, so just to go back to orientation, because it's a service that we provide and it's not actually listed in the roles and responsibilities, and where would it be listed?
So through you, Chair, we haven't listed any of the roles that we contract out for. So we have other ones like audiologists and some other roles, and we haven't included those. But that would be something we could take back for consideration, but none of those roles are currently listed.
Okay, I just think if a parent is trying to understand what services are applicable and they're trying to understand the plan, I know this is a very heavy plan, so it's probably gonna take a lot of help to understand. But if they're looking for orientation mobility and trying to understand where their child can get those type of services, understanding that it's contracted out, where might they find that information here? Not, they would find it here.
It could be listed in this standard for sure under roles and responsibilities. So we'll take that back for consideration of inclusion of all of those roles. And then just specifying that they are not staff, that they are contract employees.
Thank you. I would also urge that with the audio. My question is about the QR code. I mean, it was on the slide.
Where is it? Yeah, so through you, yes, yeah, so through you, we did offer at our last meeting a link. And our special education plan has gone live on the website and has been sent as promised in the all families messages with a link to provide direct feedback to all families. That was a request from SEAC. So that has gone in the November all families message with a link to the special education plan. And on each standard is the ability for families to give the feedback to. So we went through last meeting, how to fill in the feedback. So you just press it, what member are you? So we have a link for family, community, SEAC, and then you're able to give feedback there. QR codes is for people who like to use their phones. We have made sure that when we created the form that we created it accessible for both phone, iPad and laptop use.
So is this QR code on posters, schools, or how does it get to the people who are going to be providing input?
So through you, Chair, the link is embedded within the website for our spec ed plan. So any parent or student or community member who is looking for information, the link will be there. And then, as we said, we've sent it out in a variety of ways, but at this time, we don't have it on posters in schools.
I mean, you may have it, so it might as well use it elsewhere. Yes, Jess?
So it is available for our associations to provide input through, okay.
And through you, Chair, if you look at we're kind of asked to try to understand who the feedback's from. Is it from a student, a parent, a community member, or SEAC or other? And then you can just put in whatever you like, right? And then it asks what standard are you giving feedback on? And we go into very deliberative feedback. And we've also made a commitment in our prior meetings to make sure that we are bringing back feedback in an interim place, because last year I think that the committee found the feedback overwhelming at the end. So what we are committing to doing is reading all the feedback we've collected up until January, and in a meeting providing kind of through a chart what we received as feedback, and if we're making any changes based on that. If you look right now, this is the form Thank you, Mark, for pulling it up. This is what the form looks like. So you're able to put it in there. What standard are you making? What standard is the comment about? What page number? And what's your recommendations?
It's a great form.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Actually,
Go ahead, trustee Clark.
through you, Chair, I just have a question. Psychoeducational consultant. How do you become one? And how, like, I'm not asking for myself to become one. I'm just like, what is it? Like, I can understand and speculate what it is, but what actually is it?
Yeah, and through you, Chair, we happen to have our two psychology managers that's sitting with us. So I'll ask Dr. Amelia Shu to kind of share the role of psychoeducational consultant. Dr. Shu.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, psychoeducational consultants have either a master's or a doctorate degree focused on school psychology or clinical psychology, primarily, and that's also that's what in terms of their training and educational background.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? No other.
So through you, Chair, I'll just finish up by talking a little bit about the standards review for next month, because we had a question that we wanted to put to members of the committee. If we're going in numerical order, next month would be 5 and 6. We're currently undertaking a pretty significant rewrite of part of standard 5 around some of the parents' guides. And so just wondering if you would like us to bring 5 and 6 next month, knowing that 5 won't be completed, and have a more proactive approach to what you'd like to see included, or if you'd like us to skip 5, finish more of the parent guide and come back in a later month with it so that you have a chance to look at the more comprehensive rewrite of that standard and provide feedback at that time. I'm open either way. We thought we'd ask because it is a more significant rewrite than the first 4 standards that we talked about.
Did you want to discuss or do you want to hold the vote?
We discussed, I think,
Yeah, we
again,
can discuss.
quickly for the members of the committee, I think the proactive approach is probably our best approach. Because if we get it next committee as long as it's not a burden for staff, but given staff are offering generously, I think it's nice to be included. If we hear what they have to say, don't have much to add, great. And if we do, at least we can say we've been given the opportunity. So I would say proactive approach, as long as it's not holding anything up.
So you would suggest that we like number 5?
Bring 5.
Bring 5. Yeah. Everybody else? Go ahead, trustee Clark.
Yeah, through you, Chair. If we wait, how much of a backlog would that create for the committee? And what type of timeline? I mean, would be able to get through all the other things that we're concerned about?
So through you, Chair, we would simply substitute 2 other standards next month so that we're not creating a backlog. In terms of timelines, I don't want to commit to a timeline at this point, but I'm not worried about a backlog. It was more just preference in terms of providing us with some feedback up front that we can incorporate or reviewing after we've done much of the writing. So I am prepared either way. Just wanted to put it out there for consideration.
Through you, Chair, I would just say, yeah, but my thinking is I'm thinking back to our SEAC plan. I think this way, if we have the proactive approach, if staff are okay with it, we have 5 and 6, we won't be able to say we weren't involved, everyone will be involved, we'll have the opportunity to contribute. And then if there's not much to add, great. And if we have some great things to add, even better. So I think motion for a vote, Chair.
Okay. All right, we have a motion to vote. Do we have a secondary to vote? Okay. All in favor of proactive plan? Carried.
Okay, thank you. And I have standards 5 and 6 here to share ahead as well as we have done previously. So I'll just do some materials management and then I'll pass those out to everybody. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right, and that's the conclusion of your presentations. Okay, so with some people like to move for receipt of presentation of the trustee card. And we have a secondary trustee out.
Perfect.
Do you have any? All right. Okay, we're gonna move on to number 7.3, which is SIEP. Focus on special education. Does this happen?
Yep, through you, Chair, I'd like to ask my superintendent colleague, Laura Chavarro from the Curriculum and Student Success Department to please present.
Thank you so much, and through you, Chair, thank you so much for having me, folks, in this space. My name is Laura Chavarro. I'm the Superintendent of Curriculum and School Improvement, and I'm happy to present the School Improvement and Equity Planning Site Report for the 24-25 school year. For clarity, I will be referring to the School Improvement and Equity Planning Site as the SEAC site. There are 4 steps to the SEAC process, as you can see on the screen. Step 1 is our goal set, is our data review and context setting step. Step 2 is where the school teams review the data and begin their action planning. Step 3 is when schools monitor the implementation of the goals that are set in step 3, ensuring there's improvement and there is momentum forward. And step 4 is when the schools reflect on the work that they have done in the previously identified steps and ensure that the plan moving forward takes place. In PDSB, we've digitized all those 4 steps for schools to use across the district. This ensures that all of our schools are able to input their SEAP information into one online platform. The SEAP process offers schools opportunities to continuously monitor their data and to track student progress. Our efforts are always grounded in identifying disproportionalities in student outcome data. This process also ensures that school teams continue to work through PDSB's equity toolkits and resources that ensure that our work is grounded in anti-oppressive, anti-ableist, and anti-racist approaches. This year, schools are asked to create 2 SEAP goals. I apologize, my slide deck is out of order. Here it is. This year, schools are asked to create and report on 2 SEAP goals. SEAP Goal 1 is around the sense of belonging and well-being within our learning environments. And SEAP Goal 2 is about achievement with a focus on literacy and mathematics across curriculum areas. Each school will work with their school teams, which include parents and community members, through their school councils to create goals that align with the school data and the school context. The SEAP process and the SEAP committee work alongside the use of the multi-year strategic plan. The multi-year strategic plan encompasses the 4 key goals, and they are designed to drive student success and create equitable learning environments in our schools. And as many of you already know, the goals are student achievement, safety and well-being, equity and inclusion, and community engagement. So this slide aligns the student achievement plan, which is outlined by the ministry. This is our reporting tool that we report back to the ministry, and it is public facing, the multi-year strategic plan, and the SEAP process. They all align and they all work cohesively to ensure that we're all working towards the same goals of student achievement and well-being. School improvement work must be responsive to the voice of the students and the families whom we serve. By doing so, we ensure that our efforts are student-centered and reflective of the diverse needs of our school communities. SEAP supports school leadership in setting high expectations, using responsive strategies, and monitoring progress through data to address the disproportionalities in outcomes for marginalized students. The SEAP process emphasizes creating safe, inclusive environments with high standards. It aligns with our board practices, our board policies, and our ministry directives. SEAP also supports the ongoing work we do in classrooms with students who have IEPs, who are neurodiverse, and with exceptionalities. Our approach is grounded in an anti-ableist, anti-oppressive process. The SEAC, as you can see, is founded on these resources that we continuously reference and utilize in the work that we do around school improvement. The next set of slides are intended to explain how we monitor student progress and improve classroom practice instructions for neurodiverse students and for those who have an IEP. This specific information presented in the slides tonight were not included in the board report, as the report is intended to be a high-level overview of SEAC. However, the team felt that it was important to share with you the continued work in support of students in our classrooms, specifically those with IEPs or who have exceptionalities. Through the SEAC process, we are continuously reviewing and enhancing our work in order to ensure it's inclusive, differentiated, and universally designed to better support students with unique learning needs. The work we do in this regard requires that we monitor 3 key areas to ensure that we see progress. The ministry has provided us with those 3 key priority areas. The first one being curriculum fidelity, and that is in the blue column. In the green column, the ministry requires that we ensure that we focus on educator practice. And the yellow column is about knowing our learners, the learners in our care. So these are the 3 key priority areas that we monitor throughout the school improvement process to ensure progress. In collaboration with the special education department, the curriculum department identified various indicators to measure improvement in those 3 areas. So for example, in the blue area, which is around curriculum, we monitor by looking at the roles of staff and families and teams. We look at the structures that are in place to support IEPs, and we look at the communication processes that happen around curriculum instruction. In the green area, which is around teacher professional learning, we look at how timely and useful the training and the professional learning is for our staff who are working with our students. We ensure that new strategies are in place, and we monitor success of that. In the last column, which is the yellow column, we are looking at how well we know our learners, and that is involving families in the decision-making around instructional practices. As you can see from this slide, it's around how we measure those 3 key priority areas. How are we measuring the success? We always know that every action has a reaction. There is an input, there is an output, and there is an outcome. Ministry has also directed us by providing key performance indicators to conduct these measurements. So it is a very strategic, explicit process to ensure that we are monitoring and we are engaging in increases in student achievement levels. When we bring this to life in classrooms, we do that using a tiered approach. So our teaching happens in tiers. I'm going to focus tonight on talking about literacy specifically. However, in this case, it applies to all curriculum areas. But for the purpose of tonight, we're going to focus on literacy, but because we can extend it to other areas in the curriculum. In this case, tiered literacy instruction happens in 3 tiers, 3 steps. Tiered intervention is a way of providing explicit instruction to support students, including those with IEPs, to develop reading, writing, and oral language skills. The support is based on the child's progress and their individualized learning goals. Tier 1 is about whole class instruction. We work with all students in a whole class approach. Every student receives high quality language instruction that's accommodated, modified, and or differentiated as needed. In this tier, educators use resources and tools to support all the learners in the classroom. Then we go into a tier 2 model. Same classroom, same group of students, but now we work with a smaller group of students on specific skills that are necessary to bump up the skill set that the student needs in order to engage with literacy tasks. So that's the tier 2 approach. Tier 3 is when our students require more explicit, more specific, or individualized support. That does not preclude this child who's receiving tier 3 support from tier 1 or tier 2. So by the time they reach tier 3, they are continuously referring and receiving tier 1 and tier 2. This is a dynamic process. What happens is students work 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 with an educator on specific skills, then go back to the tier 2 approach, go back to the tier 1, and back and forth it goes in order to solidify the skills that are necessary. These are some of the tools that we use to work with tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. We try to ensure that our documents and our resources are differentiated, address our universal design model, our anti-ableist approach, and also offer us the data that we need in order to monitor the key performance indicators that the ministry has given us. With that, we take all of this information, all of the data that we conduct through assessment tasks to monitor the SEAC goals, to ensure that there is progress and there is action and achievement happening at all levels of this process. That's the end of my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Trustee Elvis, and then we'll hold it on.
Thank you, Chair Foster, through you, Chair. Just one housekeeping item, page 34 of 118, there's a typo in SEAC goal 1. It's just the rest of the goal didn't make it in, but that's okay. Just a typo for us to fix. That's okay. It happens. My question is regarding the next steps on page 39 for success measures. All schools will have implemented SEAC and uploaded relevant data for monitoring and reflection into the school SEAC site. There are clear reductions in concerning behavior across all schools. Excuse me, there is an increase in student achievement levels with a clear reduction or elimination of disproportionalities of achievement areas. We're not listing a percentage. How will we, I mean, I think it's easy enough to say, I'm not sure what a clear reduction is or a clear increase. Can we be a little bit more specific? Can we set a target to achieve?
That's a great question, and through you, Chair, thank you for that question. Every school is intended to set their targets within their school goals. So they know what their data sets are as of step 1, and their goal needs to indicate either a percent increase, a number of students that they will be shifting, a number of classroom practices. So every school will set their own targets that are monitored by this superintendent responsible for the schools.
And so through your Chair, as follow-up, will we see that data? Will the Board of Trustees see that data? Will I be able to see how many schools from PDSB met their target, exceeded their target, failed to reach their target?
Thank you for that question, and through you, Chair. Our intention is to support with this data in by the end of the year as best as we can.
Okay, so so I'm clear, 100% of all of our schools before they implement the SEAC goals are going to set a percentage that they're going to increase achievement by?
Thank you for that question, through you, Chair. The expectation is in all of our schools in PDSB, we will have 2 SEAC goals. One is around sense of belonging with clear measures of success, and those success measures will be addressed by the end of the year through a variety of means, depending on what the measurement tool or the KPI that the school chooses to use, and the same would apply to achievement. So that's our intention, and that is our goal.
So last question, what would be the key performance indicators of target percentage increase?
Oh, great question. Thank you for that question, and through you, Chair. The ministry, as indicated in the slide, have actually created KPIs for us. So the KPIs could be in the form of attendance. It could be in the form of EQAO. It could be in the form of report cards. It could be in the form of engagement. It could be in the form of IEP goals met, graduation rates, credit accumulate. Lots of key performance indicators.
I'll be interested to see arithmetic and literacy, but I appreciate the response. Thank you.
Yes. I was just going to ask that question around KPIs. The KPIs that you mentioned are all around achievement goals, like academic. But what about KPIs on like mental health and well-being, equity and inclusion? It says that it's around student engagement and well-being. So how do you track that, measure that? What's the benchmark? What's the baseline? Great question. Thank you for that question, and through you, Chair. Our sense of belonging goal is measured through previous census data that we had and what students have performed and answered on the census, which was 2023. We have internal surveys that our schools are doing. We also have a lot of feedback mechanisms from students. We've built in a lot of opportunities for our students to tell us how they feel about certain things that are happening in the school, as well as their sense of belonging. Attendance data is also a part of the measurement tool that we use. Engagement in specific actions, activities, and tasks. So there is a variety of ways that are anecdotal, as well as qualitative and quantitative that we use, but every school has a list of tools that they can choose from depending on the students in their care, what it is that they're measuring. So they're very tailored specifically to every school.
Right. To you, Chair. So how is the SEAC designed to, let's say, interact with the special education plan within a school? It's different. Is there some expectation specific to that?
Yeah, through, that's a great question, Ray. Thank you for that. We work together on the development of the SEAC goals and site in its early stages, and wanting to really honor that we do have students who are on an alternative learning plans. So what we've done is what I shared in my oral report today is that we've created metrics for students in congregated classes who might be on an alternative learning goal, for whom reading and writing and functional literacy and numeracy might look different, with measurement tools that is meant to measure progress for those students, and both progress in functional literacy and numeracy, progress in moving towards learned independence, and transition, into different areas or into the workplace. So we've taken the guidelines of SEAC and moved it into that pilot that we're sharing with you, that we're happy to bring to you, the different metrics, but we're still measuring and have high expectations for student achievement. It just looks different for some classes.
It'd be good to see that.
We're happy to bring it. We just wanted feedback from the pilot schools because the tool is in development, and certainly wanted to make sure that when we're developing resources to serve schools, that we include the voices of schools. They know best what they need to serve students. So we really actively involve them in the decision-making process, but happy to bring that to you in the new year.
So are all schools in the board now at step 3, or where are we? Where are we? What percentage of the director, Camille Logan, can answer that question?
It's all great, but if they're not doing it. Thank you for that. Thank you for that question. And through you, Chair. So every month, we ensure that every month in our family schools meeting, so a family schools meeting is when all of our principals with their superintendent meet monthly for half a day and discuss operational matters, professional learning matters, and SEAC. So every month we have an hour dedicated where centrally we provide explicit instructions and steps that our superintendents work with our principals on the SEAC process. As you notice from the SEAC process, it's cyclical, right? So in some cases, we start the cycle with set of data and we start working towards goal and implementation. And as we're gathering data around in step 3, we realize we don't have enough data, or we realize the data that we looked at may not necessarily be aligned with the goal or what we're seeing in our schools. So we go back and cycle back. And that is part of the school improvement process, because we are shifting and being responsive, making sure that we are addressing the needs with different goals and maintaining that momentum around school improvement and making sure that the data does move. Because the last thing we want to do is continuously work on one thing, but it doesn't yield the results we want. So there's continuous monitoring happening. So what I can assure you is that step 1 and step 2, we've all set goals. We're now mucking around with step 3.
And through you, Chair, I would add that the way that the SEAC site has been developed is that all field superintendents have access to all school-based sites. So at any time, they can see what the goals are, what the data was, to use the goals and be able to provide comments or feedback as it's going on. So it is a heavily monitored process.
So this site where all this information is being kept, it's a, if something works really well, will it be disseminated through everywhere?
Thank you for that question, Chair. We have presented provincially and to the ministry several times about our school improvement and equity planning site and the processes that we have put forward. Many times we have presented, and we are, I can proudly say, PDSB is leading the province with this work. We continuously improve it, we continuously work, we continuously seek feedback. We're one of the first boards to actually bring in congregated classrooms, A4, IEPs, and special education into the school improvement and equity planning process. So we continuously monitor and work with, we're always open to feedback and input.
And just for a bit of clarity, you mentioned that in the overview, it's a focus on students who are neurodivergent. Do you mean neurodivergent?
Neurodivergent, I apologize. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because yes, neurotypical is part of neurodivergent. So. Jennifer?
So how can parents and families understand at their school what those goals are?
Great question. So moving forward in January, all the schools are expected to include their school improvement goals on their school sites. That's what we are working towards. One big piece of the work that we are doing is ensuring that family voice through school council and through engagement is included in the school goal setting process, because we believe that families are a big part of the goal and implementation and fulfillment of the goal. They need to know where their child is at, what the goals are around the child's learning environment, and the three key priorities. So it is built in. Many schools are moving forward through that. Some schools are starting, and some schools have been doing this for several years. So we're at different phases, but our goal is by January, school sites all have our school goals.
Okay. You're good. Your things off. Did you want to ask another question, Jennifer?
Yeah, I can't remember what it was.
And your little your light's not on again.
Yeah. Get rid of it. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else have a question while Jennifer's thinking? Go ahead, trustee Elvis.
No question, but I'll try not to fill with my colleagues. I will just re-echo our great work. I'm glad to hear that we're leading the province, and I think that deserves saying again. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah. I feel like that for you. Sorry. When it comes to KPIs, and you talk about using the student census, are we giving the schools information on particular groups so that we can actually see if we are impacting the certain groups that we're targeting, so that they can have KPIs based on our
So that is a great question, and through you, Chair. The census data does indicate a significant amount of information specific to students. We can't track the name to the student, but there are enough information that help us understand that there are cohorts or identities or specific gender specific identifications for us to track and to monitor. Some schools data suppressed, as you guys would know, if the number is too small, we don't have that data, but in some schools we can see trends and patterns. So yes, we do use a lot of that information when we have it to ensure that it informs the SEAC goals.
And my last question is, I would love to see at SEAC some of these improvement goals and how they're going and what progress is on them on a regular basis, and that'd be really interesting.
We'll take that back. Thanks. Thank you.
Anybody else? But that was lovely to hear it. Thank you for that presentation, Erin. Yeah. Always had some really good questions and lots of discussion with regards to that. Thank you for that. Jennifer, would you like to move her procedure? Would you like to second? Thank you, trustee Ellis. All right. We are going to move on to 7.4, the excursion. Excursion policy.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I would like to ask a coordinating principal, Sambal Kakab, and school-based principal, Anna Taurino, to please present this report.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to share the board report 7.4 for excursions policy and OP that was revised in 2024 with the release date of the operating procedures in June of 2024. In the package, you will find a report on the policy and procedures, as well as a copy of the excursions policy and operating procedures, including the appendices to support the operationalization and planning and implementation of excursions. The slide deck in front of you highlights some key changes to the revised excursion policy and procedures. Next slide, please. One back. Thank you. The excursions policy and operating procedures incorporates values of equity, of access and opportunity, inclusion and accessibility in the planning and execution of educational excursions. They both provide advance notice to parents and guardians explaining the relevance, nature, details, supervision, potential risks, and facilitate informed consent from families. The policy and operating procedures prioritize student safety through the planning and execution of excursions. The documents also ensure informed consent from all PDSB stakeholders. And finally, they establish a consistent process across all schools for excursions. For the operating procedure specifically, there are some notable revisions. We have included a new excursion planning template containing all excursion details with inclusion and accessibility considerations integrated directly into planning. This template includes accountability measures and appropriate approvals. Historically, we had multiple checklists that supported inclusion, and in our revised documents, our new templates are front and center and include the accessibility considerations right from the onset planning. There are new additions to the procedures that include a list of approved activities during curricular excursions that our risk management might support, as well as safety measures that need to be outlined to ensure that our students are safe during all inclusion excursions. And finally, our traditional school walking permission form that was shared in every elementary school is now revised and renamed to the Informed Consent Outdoor Experiential Education in the Local School Community, and available for all schools to adjust as needed. Next slide. Finally, the lead teacher is asked in this procedure to host pre-excursion information sessions for parents and guardians to share pertinent information and details for overnight and international trips. And finally, consistent with the policy and procedures are consistent with gender identity and expression guidelines. Staff need to determine the number of students that are going, who identifies as male or female or other, and on the approval form, so that planning for including non-binary students may choose the gender for which they feel safe during an overnight excursion. And our previous documents were very gender specific and very exclusionary. So definitely needed to revise the documents to reflect human rights. Instrumental to the development of these procedures was the work done by a committee that was led by my colleague, Principal Anna Taurino, and her team member, Catherine Goof, who was not able to be here tonight. And this work was used as the foundational building blocks for the revision of the operating procedures. I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Anna, to speak to the process and share a key resource her team has been working on to support accessibility in excursions. This document in its initial form was used as a basis to develop the excursions procedures. After sharing, we are happy to answer any questions about the policy, the operating procedures, the appendices, or the proposed appendix item.
Thank you. Good evening, through you, Chair. In recognition of the unique needs of disabled and exceptional students, a collaborative team noted as the accessibility team comprised of special education department board members, principals, superintendent, teacher, and families met to address the challenges in planning accessible field trips and excursions. Families have shared how they felt their children regularly requiring accessibility accommodations have regularly felt treated as an afterthought in the planning of the trip. This dedicated group engaged in meaningful discussions to identify key issues and to develop a comprehensive list of considerations that ensure accessibility and inclusion. Additionally, outreach was conducted with vendors within the board to assess their ability to accommodate diverse needs. Our collective goal is to create enriching experiences for all students, ensuring that disabled exceptional learners are fully supported and included in school activities. On May the 3rd, 2023, the accessibility team held its first meeting. This meeting brought together a diverse group of stakeholders, including special education department board members, principals, superintendent, teachers, and families. The primary focus of this meeting was to listen to the concerns and experiences of families, discuss the challenges faced in planning accessible excursions, and share innovative ideas for improvement. During this session, participants engaged in open dialogue, emphasizing the importance of placing the needs of all students, especially those requiring accessibility accommodations, at the forefront of excursion planning. The team brainstormed various strategies to ensure that future trips are inclusive and enriching for all students. Additionally, we began to outline a framework for ongoing collaboration and communication with vendors to assess and enhance their ability to meet diverse needs. This meeting marked the beginning of a dedicated effort to create a more inclusive environment where the unique needs of all students are fully supported and prioritized in all schools. Following the initial meeting, the accessibility team reconvened in June to review progress and update their plans. This follow-up session was crucial for assessing the initial ideas and strategies discussed in May. The team evaluated the feedback received from families, identifying areas that required further action and refinement. During this meeting, the team also reviewed the responses from vendors regarding their capacity to accommodate diverse needs. This allowed the team to make informed decisions about which vendors could best support their goals of inclusivity and accessibility. Additionally, they began drafting detailed guidelines and best practices for planning future excursions, ensuring that all student needs are prioritized. The June meeting reinforced the team's commitment to creating a more inclusive environment. So in the document that was just shared with you, that's just an abbreviated version of the appendice. What you'll see there is actionable items to be considered prior to booking excursions. And really, why we like this piece is that, as a principal who's overseeing, different proposals that are coming through teachers and educators, educational assistants who want to take kids on trips. It's really a snapshot and makes it easier to, vet through, ensuring that they follow the process and also, they haven't missed anything during the trip planning. So just some things to look at. Confirming looking at vendor, confirming the vendor is board approved and meets all board policies. Vendor contacted to plan for accommodations with accessibility needs for attending students, including activities planned to foster collaboration and inclusion to avoid isolation among students. Adequate staff are able to attend and supervise to meet the students' personal care and safety needs. So in preparation for the trip, information sessions and messages held for overnight or high-risk trips, communicating with families throughout regarding event details, barriers and accommodations, environmental allergens, dietary accommodation, and accessible considerations if applicable. Considering the interests, strengths, and family input of students with accessibility needs when planning and preparing for excursions. Confirming the availability of ramps, elevators, inclusive washrooms with dignified and easy access and accommodations.
providing consideration and sensitivity to student privacy when planning, using the accessibility checklist, PDSP, for detailed accessibility planning, welcoming consultants and advocates as needed for family support, which could be caseworkers, Indigenous student advisors, and so on. Screening, contacting vendors to ensure anti-oppressive and anti-ableist practices have been centered and aligned with the board's equity and inclusive practices. Staff to conduct a pre-visit to assess accessibility, diverse representation shown in promotional materials. Also, transportation during departure and arrivals, allowing early or late transitions for students with accessibility needs, accessible busing arranged for students to include a number of students so as not to exclude and isolate the child or children who has accessibility needs. And really, this came from a labor of love and, my own learning as principal, being in the role and planning and supporting and approving trips. This was a big learning experience for me with the help of one of my families who really met with me and, supported us and really helped to shift my own thinking when it came to providing accessible experiences for students.
So through you, Chair, a few things. I just want to highlight the incredible leadership of Principal Tormina and her ability to move from a school-based practice into a desire to make a systemic change. And it's leaders like Anna that really inspires us and allows her leadership to be a vehicle through which families feel safe to share and make change across the system. And this is really rooted in the community. So wanted just to highlight that. So the ask this evening is, and of course, tomorrow my assistant Pamela will send you the link to provide feedback, is to take that document that you've been given and review it from each of your specific, associations and see if you feel like it's a viable addition as an appendix to the existing operating procedures. With your considerations and feedback, we will then have to go through the governance policy department and make sure that any changes to procedures have a structure and a format that they have to follow. We would need, the curriculum department would need to present further consultations until they make final changes, but we really do value, as shared by Trustee Elves, the proactive approach to making sure that before we implement any changes that we get it right from a multidisciplinary perspective and all your perspectives. So we would ask respectfully that you take that document you've been handed out. And for those of us who joined online, I will make sure that Pam also sends a PDF link to the document and provide us any feedback about the suggested appendix that would be in addition to the operating procedure. And a thank you also to coordinating principal Kakab, who really led this work of excursions. Happy to answer any questions, and they're happy to answer any questions as well.
Okay, we'll start here. We'll go around it. Okay.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment and just a big thank you because my own son had to take an Uber or something for a trip last year with his itinerant, and he got isolated from the rest of the bus. And then the one thing that he spoke about was the experience on the bus, and that he missed the experience on the bus and the chatter and the conversations. So this is hugely impactful. So thank you so much for the work that you guys led and for taking the experience of the principal and the family experience that you had and really applying to appreciate it. And I really appreciate the clear, easy language for us to understand. So thank you.
Through you, Chair. So first to start, this was a massive part of our agenda this evening, and so kudos for the work we're putting on. Just one question I have for Appendix G, months indicated in red. Peel has not completed, Peel District School Board has not completed a road risk assessment. So I'm just gonna pick a random example. Archery, there's an N, there's a Y. Bowling, there's an N, there's a Y. Camping, there's an N, there's a Y. Those three are in red. So we haven't produced a risk assessment for those activities, or am I misinterpreting our report? It's page 107 of 118 or 53 of 57.
Thank you. Very good, Chair. Just give me a moment to.
Nope.
Your page. Very long document.
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay, so through you, Chair, thank you for the question. There are guidelines that the board follows that are put out by OPAS, which gives us directions around the regulations, around safety regulations and rules that we need to follow when engaging in various activities that are potentially high risk or at risk, and risk is on a continuum. In some cases, the board adds safety measures in addition to the ones that are outlined in OPAS, depending on the circumstances, and we go above and beyond when we implement safety measures for some activities. So this chart is intended to differentiate, when you're talking about the red, the differences between where we are following OPAS guidelines as put out and the province follows all those guidelines, and where PO might have done its own assessment and specifies guidelines that are different, always above and beyond, never less than, because the minimum standard is outlined by OPAS. I hope I answered your question.
Understood. Thank you through you, Chair. Yes, you did. I think that's great. And I'm glad to know that we're going above and beyond. My concern was relating to liability if we weren't producing those assessments, but it sounds like we only do when we want to check our proof. So just to end my question, so the ones in red, we to be clear, we did produce an assessment. We're just following OPAS.
In the part at the top, it says red font indicates that PL has completed its own risk assessment and approves or does not approve that activity. So it depends on whether there's a yes or no on the chart.
Understood. That makes sense.
So OPAS might have said this activity is okay, but PL might say we are not supporting this activity.
Understood. Better to be safe. Thank you. Big Chair. No more questions.
Jenna?
Just for transparency, I was part of this group. So I have a few questions that we had talked about that may not necessarily have been presented yet. But my first question is, this document, if it gets approved, will it be within the checklist or will it be a separate appendix by itself?
Very good question. Through you, Chair. We are definitely open, based on the feedback that we get, to definitely incorporate all and any accessibility details and criteria in a planning document, which is Appendix A. The first one, our goal is to include from the onset, and we are going to revise the planning checklist based on the feedback. Although that's good planning, and we thought that in the center accessibility, it will be there at the forefront, sometimes in the 100 pages of details that outline not only accessibility, but financial accessibility, equity, and the rules and regulations. We definitely don't want to lose some of those details, and to support educators and principals to specifically look at references that might support accessibility. We are looking potentially to add, in addition to in the document, an appendix that would allow us to specifically look at accessibility. But the goal always is to put it in the planning.
Second question is, assessing a vendor, whose job is that?
Hi. See that look? Through you, Chair. This is the reason why we have asked the purchasing department to join the Accessibility Advisory Committee. We are planning to bring this documentation and making sure that when purchasing says that we have an approved vendor, that they too are doing so through an accessible lens. Because this has to go beyond just excursions and into more systemic change around improving accessibility in our buildings. And we know the list of all the things of our ability or to hear or to see, or so this is why we invited the purchasing department to our advisory committee, and they have accepted that invitation and will be at our next meeting.
So the goal would be ultimately that if a teacher went to the board approved vendors, they would know that that vendor was approved from an accessibility point of view.
That would be the ideal end goal, yes.
And in the meantime, what's the?
Well, we hope that, you know, all educators are, when they're looking at resources or when they're looking at tools to support student learning, are doing so through understanding who their learners are. And you heard Superintendent Chavarro say that part of our SEAC goals really is a deeper understanding of understanding the identities that are in the room in front of us. And that includes not only, to your point, achievement, except, you know, data, but identity, race-based data or ability-based data, and that we're making decisions on resources and tools that would support all learners. So we have done an intensive amount of work in our board at the importance of making sure that our social and physical learning environments are reflective of the learners in front of us. So I'm quite proud of the work the board's done. I don't think we're arrived yet. I think that reinforcing that through purchasing or through budgetary decisions will always be helpful.
My concern is that by putting this on the teacher or the principal, we know that not everybody has that as experience, and learns through lived experience, right? So how do we ensure that we tell them, yes, you need to contact them and plan for accommodations and accessibility? But that's very general and generic, and that's not easy to do on the phone, first of all. And then, yeah, and then you've got every teacher is calling, say, Jumbo Sport and asking the same question. So it'd be better to say, you know, they are approved for X, Y, Z. And that's where we kind of started in this, was to have sort of that document that said this vendor is good. And we started looking at, you know, all of our different needs and challenges and say, this vendor is good for X, Y, Z, but don't do it if these are the students. And that's a very lofty goal, but that's kind of where it started, is having that, or at least having a checklist for a teacher to say, you know, these are the things I have to ask. Because my fear is if we put a lot of this pressure on the teacher, they're just not going to have excursions. Yeah, so that's definitely not what we want.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Jen, as you know, when we worked together, you know, we took it upon ourselves in the school to go through the vendors, and you know, through this journey, with accessibility and ensuring the experiences, you know, were inclusive of all students and needs. We did go through each of the vendors. Catherine Goop, one of my amazing ISSP teachers, took this on her and actually called through all the vendors and got feedback and you know, was able to put that in a document that helps us when we're planning. So when I'm planning for our experiences, I'm keeping that in mind. Within our superintendency, we had the opportunity to share as well the documents and also some of the feedback that we had for some you know, the vendors that were on there. So we did start there, but you're right, we have to, you know, take a look at that and look at how those vendors are supporting the inclusive experiences for all students.
So is there a plan to come up with that type of resource for teachers so they can?
You can certainly take that back. I have seen the working list provided by this team, and certainly just have to make sure there's other checkpoints to that. So we can certainly take that back.
Okay, we're gonna go to Trustee Benjamin and then we'll go to Jesse. Trustee Benjamin.
Yes, thank you, and through you, Chair. Thank you. Thank you for this a great report. I'm you know, all for the experiential learning part, but I was just curious about the overnight excursions. Can you give me an example of where the students would go for an overnight excursion?
Through you, Chair. Thank you for that question. There are multiple destinations and reasons why students might travel on an overnight trip. An example might be, we have an annual DECA trip where students participate in business activities. There's a competition locally. The next competition will not be local. So there's a regional within the Peel District School Board. There's an Ontario competition, for example, and then often students have to travel if they proceed through, and it becomes an overnight excursion. So that is something that has been around for many, many years. Students have access. There are overnight excursions within the province. Sometimes it's related to a sports tournament. Sometimes it's related to an extracurricular excursion to enhance the experience of students. Sometimes they are out of country and sometimes they are within. So an overnight excursion depends on the distance, the purpose of the travel, why the students are going. Sometimes it's within the Peel District School Board's control around the destination or the reason why an overnight excursion might be planned. And other times it's through participation of an external event that's organized by a third-party organization that provides an opportunity for our students. And an overnight excursion is required to support their participation in something that enhances their learning experiences, and do our best to provide equitable and fair opportunities for students across the board.
Thank you.
Jazz?
I was just wondering if there's a comment before I ask the question. I find that we often try to fit the kids with different abilities into sports that work for all children. And so I would maybe urge you to pivot and try to maybe have opportunities where the rest of the school or the class is participating in a sport that is familiar to that different abilities child. And an example is beatball. I don't see beatball on here, or blind hockey. It's a bigger puck and the child can hear the puck. And so it's still hockey for all the other kids, but it's a bigger puck so that the child doesn't feel like I'm always having to be accommodated and being singled out, but that rather that we're all playing the same sport. Like it's no different to the well-able children. I don't know what the appropriate word is or language is.
Thank you, through you, that's an absolutely fantastic idea and something that we can certainly bring forward, and that Superintendent Tabarro can bring to her phys ed coordinator. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, can I just add as well? Thank you, that's a great point. And that comes through discussions with families and, bringing in those experiences. And I know within our school, again, the support of one of our families, we were able to bring in wheelchair basketball, and we continue to bring that experience to the school. And many schools do many things to include kids, but to see our students, that they're able to identify, to connect, see someone else, to see their classmates, through that experience was pretty amazing for me to see. And that sense of belonging and actually, leading what was happening as well. It's a great experience. And again, through conversations with families and, ensuring that we're meeting the needs as well.
Did you have something else to? Okay, one more.
And I don't know if legal governance is here, because I don't know if this is appropriate, but I think I would like to make a motion to ask that purchasing look into their process and how to ensure that all of the vendors that they're working with meet accessibility needs of our students.
Isn't the last one? Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't write it down, so it's coming out of my head. So I would like to ask that, make a motion that our purchasing department, whoever's responsible, looks into a process for ensuring that all of our vendors meet all the needs of our students, the special needs.
You can list all of the process. Hold on.
Yeah. We're asking for somebody, trustee office is asking for.
Thank you, Chair. So just a clarification for the motion, would it impact, so I'm just thinking when we use that language, I'm not trying to be like a wrench, trying to just be strategic for staff. We use all vendors, like I'm just wondering if there's an implication for any other type of procurement process that we might do, or is your motion specific? We're asking for specifically for excursions, that vendors that are being considered for excursions ensure compliance with our guidelines, because I think we have that. I think that's already here.
Yeah. I thought that was already.
Is it not?
What do you mean? It's here. We have vendors that we go to regularly that are approved that do not meet the requirements of the students in our schools.
So forgive me, through you, Chair, perhaps a question through your first Superintendent Scotto. Is that accurate? Is that not the intent of this, of what's before us tonight for the excursions policy, to ensure that our vendors are compliant and inclusive?
So through you, Chair, it's more of a checklist for principals when making a decision, but it holds the responsibilities on principals and schools to make decisions for accessibilities. And I think, not to put words in your mouth, Jen, that Jen's asking that be supported through our purchasing department policy or procedures as well.
So again, through you, Chair, so perhaps if I can add to your motion or have an amendment, maybe instead of only, we add and I'm only thinking of the perhaps rare occasion where there is an activity or a field trip. I'm thinking like heritage building, or maybe something, is a really unique opportunity for students, but perhaps can't check every box on our list. So we would want it to be definite, but perhaps we can ask in your motion for that, the procurement department, for lack of a better word, do its best to be beholden to the information that we're giving principals and teachers, but we do it centrally as well.
And personally, I would not like to water it down that way, because I think the way we make change is we urge people to do what they need to do to meet requirements of the AODA and of our school board. If we continue to support people that don't, they continue to not. So we can always have loopholes for everyone in that way. So this is a discussion, so I would love to hear other people's opinion on that. That'd be great.
I think that even within the AODA, there are opportunities for loopholes. So if we hold people to the AODA, our vendors to the AODA, they're still
not.
Yeah.
Well, I think Peel district school boards values or rules, or I don't know what the word is, but your policies and procedures and what your expectation is for your schools, we should be holding our vendors accountable to that.
Through Chair, my last question would be for staff. Would staff see any problem with us accepting that motion? Would it create any undue hardship or difficulty for our current, or the legal implication for our vendors that we currently have? Do we be liable for anything?
So through you, Chair, I do have to take it back. I do not want to answer on behalf of the business side or the purchasing department. I would like to, and I know that we have, our business side very dedicated to making, movements towards accessibility. If I could take that back, you can raise the motion, but if I could take that back to get some details from the purchasing department of what that process would look like, and bring that back to you. I could put it on the motion action log as is something that comes back, and then based on that response, we can take necessary next steps.
Yeah, that's fine. I just like to have a bit more behind it than just we're going to look at it.
So this is something that we want definitely followed up on the motion and action laws. Yeah.
So do you need a motion?
So through you, Chair, are we going to add it to the motion action log, or do you want to raise as a request for further information, or do you want to do a formal motion?
I'm not sure what the difference is. What's the outcome? What's the difference?
So through the motion action log is when you ask me questions and I put them back, a response back. A motion is a more formalized process. So if you want me to ask the question, bring the response back, and based on that response, you can then decide as a committee to raise a motion. Sure.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So the clarification would be, let's play it out. For example, let's say this comes to a motion now. It would pass or fail. So in the event that it passed, it'd go to the board to, likely not tomorrow. I don't know if it would make it to the agenda, but it'd go to the next open session. And then the board would either approve or decline this motion. But I think we're leaving information on the table. We don't know if there's a legal implication or a business implication, versus the other. If we put it on the motion action log, Superintendent Sakata will come back at the next SEAC meeting and say, hey, trustees, members of our board, here are the implications or benefits or whatever there may be regarding adopting this as a hard and fast standard for procurement. And then from there, imagine Superintendent Sakata comes and says, hey, I checked this with legal and there's XYZ issue or XYZ flag. At that point, we would have the time to amend your motion to best incorporate that feedback and then take it to the board. But the motion is yours, and it's completely your choice.
So you lost me. You gave far too many, but they're too far too many words there. But I think what you're saying is that we gotta make sure that the motion is gonna pass before we even make a motion.
No, sorry, through your chair. I'll try and be more clear. All I'm saying is we add this to the motion action log, it gives staff the opportunity to give us more information so that we can craft the motion that we think is best positioned for, not for passing, but for success for our students. If Ms. Knight would like to not do that, just put the motion on the floor now for a vote, we'd be doing so with limited information, but it's absolutely within her privilege to do so.
A bunch of people online that are raising.
Yeah, okay, we have
Oh, look at Dorothy was.
Okay, we're gonna go to Jasmine. And then we'll go to Dorothy. Sorry, the governance officer.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to echo Trustee Alva's comments. He's right. And I would just add that a formal motion would be more suitable as a recommendation to the board. So that would apply to something if we are looking at including to the policy itself or any direction to staff. So my recommendation on this, I think it would be more suitable for the motion action log for staff to come back with further information and clarity.
Dorothy?
Hi, good evening. Through you, Chair. I concur with what Jennifer is stating, in that if we're not clear and decisive in terms of how we proceed with our policies and create gray areas, then it's open to interpretation. I do understand doing the background check, if you will, to get the information so we can make an informed decision. But ultimately, I do believe we should be moving in that direction. Equity and inclusion is what we're about. With that said, if we're unable to turn a big ship, if you will, on a dime, can we also put in place a timeline for which the procurement department can, I guess, impose our policies? Because again, if we have a gray area, this gray area will go on indefinitely. And I do understand the implications. I think we all do. But on the flip side of the coin, if you don't do something radical, then this will carry on for an eternity.
Jennifer.
If we put it on the action motion log and you bring back information, do I have to do a notice of motion or do a motion next month? I don't want this dragon first.
Through you, Chair, yes, if you bring a motion action log, I will commit to bringing a response back to the next meeting. It won't be me, but whoever is replacing me can bring an answer back. And Associate Director Camille Logan will also be here at the meeting. And then if you feel like there's further action required from there, then you can put a motion forward.
You can do a motion on the floor.
Yeah, you could.
So through your chair, you can do a motion on the floor. So ideally you'd have something. So what my recommendation would be, maybe put something together. If your plan is to have a motion, maybe connect with staff before the SEAC meeting. If they can give us the response of Superintendent Sakata, or someone can email the board the response, you'll have time to decide if you want to write a motion. The only reason I would suggest that is there are members on our board that like to read the motions before. But if that couldn't happen, you still have the ability to make a motion on the floor.
And through you, Chair, my motion action log response will be in the minutes, so you will get it in advance at the meeting anyway, because all of the motion, as you noticed, that all of the motion action logs with the responses are there. After I've given responses, we take them off. So you will have a response from us prior, so you'll have an indication of what you'd like for next to be. Thank you. I love it. So just confirming that I'm putting on the log. Thank you.
Jessie, did you want to? I've got something else.
I'm clear. I would like to add a motion to add extracurricular clubs that are a little bit more diverse with our different needs children. Because I don't see any on here. I know this says it's not an exhaustive list, but I would like to see a list of.
Through you, Chair, can that be feedback? Because the committee is asking for feedback, and that was the point of this report today. Okay. So through you, we are very open, as you can tell, to community feedback. So through you, if you're able to provide that in the Google Doc that we're sending to you tomorrow, then we can certainly take that back to consideration, because that would have an ability to make more significant change into the actual document. Thank you.
Anybody else? Trustee Clark?
Thank you, through Chair. It's not a question so much as I have family members that are non-binary, gender fluid, so I really appreciate the option, just putting it out there right in there about how, giving them the opportunity to be in the room, with the gender of their preference. I thought that's great, and it's especially with the way things are going in some places. It's just nice to see that we're holding the line on human rights. Thank you.
Yeah, I too am very pleased with the direction that this is going in and being more inclusive. Yeah, it's wonderful to see how people's views are changing and how people are growing as human beings, and we are all becoming better, more inclusive people. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Jennifer, would you like to? Absolutely. And Jackie, would you like to? Thank you so much for that. Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much. My kiddo is just turned 29, but he went as an overnight example, went camping and lost a $250 battery. But the joys of equipment. Yeah, character. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna go through my paper. Sorry, my narrative mind. We are moving on to 7.5, equitable assessment practices.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I would like to ask coordinating principal Andrea Dewar-Salmon and psychology managers Dr. Amelia Shu and Dr. Andrea Myrie Nurse to present the report. I'm just going to ask them to come forward so we make sure we can hear them. Thank you.
Class.
Good evening, everyone, and through you, Chair. Again, I'm Andrea Dewar-Salmon, the coordinating principal. So over the summer, we gathered a writing team together made up of resource teachers, psychologists, and psychology managers to review and advance the ACC, which stands for Assessment Consultants Committee, and we'd like to share with you our work that was done over the summer so far. So Dr. Myrie Nurse.
Hello, everyone. Please, I apologize for my voice. Just getting over a cold. Also, I'm not sure if you all remember me. I came here about 2 years ago with my previous manager, Dr. Romy Gill, where we presented ACC to the committee. And so I'm here to basically give you the background of ACC. It was the whole idea of the ACC was to disrupt disrupt and dismantle systemic, racist, ableist, oppressive practices in the criteria, selection, and prioritization process, psychoeducational referrals. It was also to provide equitable access to psychoeducational assessments. The challenge that we faced was prioritization of assessments were static rather than dynamic. The goal of the equitable access process, which is a more refined ACC, was to continue to center anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and anti-ableist practices to all types of assessments. It's to continue to refine transparency, efficiency, and consistency within the system of psychoeducational referrals. It was able to support the system with resources and tools that guide discussions and prioritizes assessments through the student's review process. So now Dr. Amelia Shu.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. This is the matrix that was developed to guide discussions related to the prioritization of potential psychoeducational assessment referrals. One of the main purposes of psychoeducational assessments is to gather information about the student portrait relating to learning strengths and areas that require support to further inform student programming. Psychoeducational assessments provide information that can lead to further personalization and precision of programming to support learning for students for whom this is essential for their success. So the matrix looks at factors, two key factors in terms of benefit for student learning, as well as the level of urgency of the assessment that's being discussed, which captures the complexity of the potential referral, how long has the student been exhibiting concerns in terms of their learning, the student's current school functioning, looking at response to interventions that have been implemented at the school, as well as family readiness. So this is around the family's understanding of the process of the psychoeducational assessment and the information that it would be gathering, and some of how intense sometimes this level of involvement can be for your child, for the student. So the key thing about having developed this matrix as a writing team was that prioritizing psychoeducational assessments as the need for what is being discussed for a student becomes a dynamic process, but the level of prioritization is responsive to the discussion that is occurring at the school from one time to the next. So it really allows for it to adjust as we put things in place for the student, as we support the student. So sometimes, when we look at an assessment, it could start off as a low priority, but over time, looking at the extensive concerns, moving towards different priorities. So this is where the matrix can capture all of that. And additionally, this supports us as a psychology team, as psychoeducational consultants, to take on those assessments that are urgent priority throughout the board. In other words, assessments for students that it will be essential for their success. So further enhancing the transparency of those conversations, and with the hope that there can be accountability and commitment to student learning in terms of psychoeducational assessment referrals. The other component of the resource that we really wanted to highlight this evening was what we had developed here in terms of reflective questions that really continues the intention of the ACC around centering anti-oppressive, anti-racist, and anti-ableist practices in all types of assessments. And really highlighting, so looking at all forms of assessments when we think about things that have happened throughout the student review process. So this can be classroom observations, teacher assessments, some of our special education teachers at the school and the assessments they can do, as well as psychoeducational assessments. Because the key of centering anti-oppressive, anti-racist, and anti-ableist practices is really around looking at how we collect the data and what do we do with the data. And so these questions kind of guide those conversations at the table, and right from the very beginning of having conversations about a student and their learning and their success. And by bringing this all back and providing a resource at the school, we're having those conversations right at the table at the school, where we have all informants, including families, who are most knowledgeable about the student, as well as school teams and the PSSP team, as well as special education resource teachers, to have these conversations throughout the student review process.
we've been slowly rolling out the changes to different stakeholders in the system because we wanted to ensure that the changes are well implemented and well understood. So we've provided the system with a memo, which was shared in October 2024. We have been at the table of PPVPA to share with the principals who are gathered there this equitable assessment practices. They were very pleased with hearing that the process is brought back to the school level so that they're engaged with the prioritizing of assessment needs for their schools. We've shared with our CERT, who are our partners in schools. We've shared with our PSSP staff, particularly our psychoeducational consultants, so that we are getting more momentum slowly as the year progresses with getting the information out to our schools and all our stakeholders. That's the end of our presentation. We're open for questions.
Does any, Jennifer? You have lots of questions tonight. Go ahead.
Couple questions about time. So you showed your chart there, you know, the highest priority, that lower box, it's low. Do we have people waiting a long time for those assessments because they don't meet that high, they have requirements?
Thank you for that question to you, Chair. So the essence of the matrix is so that we can get to those high priority assessments right away. And because of its dynamic nature, it is very likely that sometimes some of these low priority can move towards a high priority assessment and at that point. So we don't actually have a wait list because we're trying to meet needs as they come, these urgent needs where we're having conversations and recognizing that at this point in time where things have been tried and other assessments have occurred, that recognizing that a psychoeducational assessment referral at this point would be essential for further informing the student portrait.
So we're only putting people on the list for constituency if they meet that top level of requirements. So
Thank you for the clarifying question. As we don't maintain any wait lists. We have those conversations in the moment at the SRM, and that's why it was key to bringing it back to the school so that we can be responsive in the moment about those conversations around the need for psychoeducational assessment. And perhaps Superintendent Sukato, you have something else to add as well.
Yeah, and through you, Chair. So I think what Dr. Xu was saying is that there's not an official wait list. If at the student review meeting, the team, including the psychology team, has determined that everything has been done that can be done, and we don't have a deep understanding of why the student continues to not have access to enhanced learning, then we would recommend them for a psychoeducational assessment. But that's not putting them on a list in order of any priority. That's just in the system saying that they need one. And then, as Dr. Xu said, we are really doing a very good job at kind of getting to assessments as quickly as we can, because you know, what we have done is really ensured that before we move right to assessment, we're considering all other elements. Has classroom practice been considered? Have we had the family kind of come back and give feedback about what their learner portrait, what they need? So we're not moving automatically to assessment without understanding that other tiered interventions, as shared in Superintendent Chavarros, haven't been tried. Have we tried tier 2 interventions in the classroom, not just tier 1? And so we're really looking at refining classroom-based practice first before making decisions to put students forward for a psychoeducational assessment, because there has to be an unmet need there. And if we have to address kind of school-based practice, honor family voice, and follow kind of their advice as to what type of learner is before us, making sure that, as we said, our learning environments are culturally responsive, and very accessible to the children. And then after all of those things have been, yes, we're very confident that that's been done, then they come to a student review meeting 2, and with the support of the psychology team, often SLP would be involved, or any other special education resource team, and the school-based team with the families there saying, look, we've kind of gone through this pathway. We do believe that we need an assessment because we need a deeper understanding of the student's cognitive portrait. Then it's done. So there's not a wait list per se. And if that student has demonstrated need where they're not being successful in class, that's where that matrix would come into play and say, this child is not accessing learning, the gaps are increasing, we need to prioritize this right away.
So how many students are referred right now?
Currently, to you, Chair, currently all the students that are referred are students that are being assessed at this moment. So we currently have about 400 assessments this year that we have started and are working on as we speak.
So we have 400 referrals right now that you're working through out here.
So that are being done, that are actually happening in this moment right now. So they're not waiting for anything. The psych is already currently in the process of completing the assessment. We are getting closer. We have about 45 psychs in our department. We used to have
We're doing well.
So, okay, Dorothy, go ahead. Dorothy, did you have a question?
Yeah, through you, Chair. I would like to know how long it would take from start to finish. I guess I have one or two questions. How long would it take from start to finish once you guys have gone through your preliminary processes for a psych assessment to be done? You stated that you don't have any in the queue currently, but you are working on them.
So this is where the complexity of the referral will come into play. I think generally sometimes when we speak with families and we share information about how long an assessment would typically take, we kind of say 6 to 8 weeks. But there is complexity as it evolves, and sometimes as we embark on the assessment, we might find other pieces that didn't come up previously in discussions. So I would say 6 to 8 weeks, but it really varies from student to student and depending on the referral.
Okay, so it typically takes about 6 weeks to 8 weeks. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And can you clarify for me in terms of the new process? Because I am trying to understand or distinguish between the old process for which I guess my youngest son has gone through the system. He's finished maybe 2 years now. And my other son, whom also has a disability, went through the psychoeducational assessment as well. So I'm trying to discern what the differences are between previous and the enhanced processes that you now have in play, because it sounds to me that they're one and the same.
So through you, Chair, you're absolutely correct. The actual psychoeducational assessment is the same process. It's the decision-making, moving back from centralized decision-making into school-based decision-making. And that's the change we're bringing to SEAC tonight. The process of the psychoeducational assessment remains consistent.
Okay, so again, excuse my ignorance, but you're stating that it's moved back to the school making the decision. If memory serves me correct, it was the school that was orchestrating, if you will, if the assessment moves forward, because they go through the review process with the in-house school team. Then they bring the information forward for it to be reviewed at the board level. The recommendation is made at the board level. It goes back to the school for them to implement. So I'm again trying to understand where the differences are. There must be something in the nuance that I'm missing.
So through you, Chair, yes, that step where it does happen at the school level, they have the conversations, they wanted to go forward to the ACC, which brought it centrally before. Now we've removed that step of bringing it central, and we have done extensive training with our psychology team of making sure that the referrals that are made are anti-ableist, anti-racist, anti-oppressive. So we've removed that middle step that you just indicated, Dorothy, to make the decision-making land in the school and not need to come central.
Okay, I hate to belabor this, but it was always done at the school level, if you will, because it would not go forward unless the principal and the team okays it. So if it falls back onto or in the lap of the principal, that's where it was in the beginning. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Hi, Dorothy. This is Andrea, Dr. Carriner's. Your memory is fantastic. I'm so impressed that you remembered what myself and Ravi told the committee 2 years ago. I'm so impressed. So at the time when ACC was created and implemented, yes, it was decided during the SRM2 meeting. It was the site that completed the forms, to which the forms would then go to a centralized location, whereby myself and Rami, we were the chair of the various ACC meetings to discuss each of these referrals. And from that, we would discuss priority. We would prioritize them during the ACC meetings. What this new process is doing is it's removing that centralized stage and keeping it within the school, whereby it's not really the principal's decision. It's the committee's decision with input from the psychoeducational consultant as to one, if this is an appropriate referral, but also looking at the school's referral list. You know, where does that referral actually land in terms of, is this something that we need to do right away, or can this child wait to be the third or fourth on the list to be assessed?
And if you remember my conversation back then,
I do remember you, Dorothy. I do remember you, Dorothy.
It was more in respect to the kids that are caught between the rock and the hard place. So for instance, if you have a list per se that you're prioritizing from, what happens, there'll always be something more emerging, something more critical. And when I say something, I'm using the terminology loosely. I'm referring to a profile of an individual.
So Dorothy, what is different from 2 years ago? If your memory serves you correctly, the department was exceptionally short-staffed.
Yes.
It was extremely short-staffed, which caused a lot of problems for us. What Dr. Amelia and Andrea have done is that they have hired sufficient staffing that all schools have a representation, a psychoeducational consultant with them, which has made an enormous difference with the decision making within schools that we did not have 2 years ago. So, that has been helpful. The change in terms of removing the centralized decision stage has been helpful. It really lands in the school where the school really knows their students, and they using the PSSP staff to talk about strategies for various students. The schools are actually able to evaluate whether these strategies are working or not. And if they are not working, like, the low students in terms of priority, that in itself will push that student up if all strategies, everybody's working hard on this student and it is not effective, that will push up because obviously we need more information as to what is happening. So that's where the dynamic comes in, as opposed to putting in a referral and it just sits there until the ACC committee convenes, and then it sits there again until a staff picks it up. So it's a very different process that's going on right now.
Thank you for revamping the process in terms of caseload. So before, I don't know if it's the same now, before the psych, the individuals on your team had a bunch of, a family of schools for which they were responsible for. So is that still the case? And what's their caseload looking like? So if they have, let's say, 20 schools for, and I think that's just, you know, me embellishing. If they have 20 schools for which they're responsible for, and within that school, they may have a dozen or so children for which is on their caseload. Give me an idea of what their caseload looks like.
Thank you for your questions. To you, Chair. This is Dr. Xu. I'm just going to respond to some of that in different parts. So as in some essence, we still have maintained a superintendency group for site consultants. Each full-time site consultant has anywhere between 6 to 8 schools that they consistently provide supports to. They are sitting at the SRM, the student review meeting table to have amongst their PSSP colleagues to support students, to support those conversations that come up. They provide any consultations at their schools. But in terms of the assessments, and that was why a big part of this shift was to bring it back to schools was to be far more responsive. Now with psychs at all schools, sitting at the tables of all schools, so that we can be much more responsive to those conversations as they come up. And as you so rightfully, Dorothy, mentioned that sometimes something comes up, and so that's where the matrix helps to prioritize. And so with these superintendency groups, the intention is as we have criticality around these conversations around the potential need for psychoeducational assessment, being able to prioritize and have commitment as a psychology department to get to those urgent needs. So what happens is when if there are multiple urgent assessment needs at a particular school, and the site consultant at the school is currently already in process of a number of assessments, other psych assessments within that superintendency group, depending on what their caseload looks like, are committed to pick up those urgent assessments. So there's access in that sense where we have maintained what we set out with the ACC, because we still continue to be quite significantly lower in the numbers than we used to be.
Okay, so in terms of, again, I'm going by memory, but the schools had a certain dollar amount for which is allocated out for psych assessments for the year. Is that still the case? Because that also would create some limitations or boundaries, barriers for the families to access, for their child to access a psych assessment.
Yeah, so no, there's not a dollar amount given. We ensure that students who need assessments will get assessments.
Okay, so again, I don't want to belabor this, but there's two different things taking place, because it used to be that the schools specifically had set amounts for which they can allocate out for a psych assessment. And they had emergency funds for which that's a different conversation. They had emergency funds that I was told that they could access, but more times than not, that was not the case.
No, that is not our understanding. It's not done through a funding mechanism at all. It's not based on a dollar value. We have psychoeducational consultants, as Dr. Xu said, in every school, making sure that assessments that have met the criteria as an area of need to determine an unmet need for a child will be done.
Okay.
But Dorothy, I'm happy to take this offline if you'd like and have a further conversation, because I think you're asking some great questions, and you'll really help us to clarify and streamline our conversations and commitments. So really happy for you to meet with the managers at another time if that would provide further insight.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. And thanks for the presentation.
It would, yeah, I think. Obviously, we have some interest in this, so maybe this is something we can bring back to another meeting. Is more presentation on psychoeducational assessments.
I think so, because in terms of dollar amounts for families to get that done.
And Dorothy, I think maybe that's something, that they can bring back. It's about dollar amount, sorry. And we do have another question from Leanne. Sorry, Dorothy.
Is this thing on? It is.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit confused because, with my organization, the Learning Disabilities Association of Peel Region, and we will be renaming ourselves soon, we get calls constantly, that daily, from parents saying, my child is in the system, they're on a list waiting for a psych ed assessment. And how do we move up the list? So is it something that it's every day we get calls about this? So is it just that every parent doesn't know what's going on, or that because there's still a list somewhere, right? Because there's not a psychoeducational consultant at every school. There is one per every 6 to 8 schools. Otherwise, there would be many, many more psychoeducational consultants, correct?
So there's one assigned through you, Chair. There is one assigned to every school, but they do have responsibility for 6 to 8 schools.
Yeah, so they're not there.
So they are at the student review meetings, right? So we made a commitment to have all of our PSSP staff, occupational therapists when needed at our SRM meetings to make sure that when we're discussing a student, we do through a multidisciplinary lens. So my recommendation, Leanne, would be to ensure that they're reaching out to the school principal, perhaps communication to principals around demystifying the list or the wait list would be something for us to take back.
The challenge is, but I just want to confirm, there is a list. It's not as though any child that shows up at a PDSP school and indicates that they start to struggle in school is boom, off to a psych ed assessment. That's not happening, right?
No, through you, Chair, absolutely not happening. It's done through an SRM, which is a documented meeting.
Right. Yep, I've done 2 of them.
Yes, so if documented, and again, all of the criteria to meet the assessment need would be, they would put through a referral at that meeting, which generates a list for the psychoeducational consultants through which they would do the assessment. So yes, so I would encourage families to reach out to the school, the school principal. And I think that, we want to demystify that, there is a list. But it's not like oh, you're number 1, I'm going to move you to number 4. That's not how it works. It's done, as Dr. Shu said, through a matrix, a decision-making matrix, and we are really getting to the assessments much more quickly than we had, as Dr. Myrina shared, than we had in the last couple of years, because we've made a steadfast commitment to hiring more staff.
Okay. There is a list. I'm going to say about it.
There is a list.
It's what it's not.
On your app and watching it.
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you very much. I'll follow more.
Okay, trust you.
I would love to have another conversation about this. Problems yet.
To close the session, the question I think everyone wants the answer to is how many people are on that would-be list? Total. How many are waiting for the Peel District School Board?
We don't have that list, so therefore there's no number. We pick up assessments and we do them. I mean, with what Dr. Andrea Marina is trying to say is, schools talk about that, so sometimes it gives that misperception as what Superintendent Sukato is saying, is that there is a list in that sense. But we're hoping that with this resource and with building transparency through a matrix, that families would be at that table having those conversations, that perhaps more clarity can be provided.
Can I just say to, sometimes people confuse a ghost list.
Yeah.
There is no ghost list, but a psychologist, a psychoeducational consultant works from a referral list.
Yeah.
So if, if you're at an SRM and you have a student being presented and it's very clear and that student needs to be referred according to the matrix, then yes, that student will be placed
On the referral list.
for referrals. So in terms of this imaginary ghost list, there is none.
No.
Well, so just as a follow-up through you, Chair, and I risk of dragging this on longer, trying to be cognizant of the time staff have allotted us. Excuse me for taking a turn, Chair, but yeah, your association again, can you remind me of it?
Learning Disabilities Association of Peelschools.
So the Learning Disability Association is having calls from parents noting the list, so I think we're using the wrong terminology. So I'm happy to put a motion on the floor if needed, but the information I think that the board would like, and I hope I'm not speaking on behalf of the committee, but we'll find out, is how many people are awaiting any type of care. Is that fair? You can add that question.
Yeah, trustee Elvis, I think because list is used interchangeably in so many different ways, and they have a working list, that they're working through, but we're curious to see how many are waiting to be worked through. And so I think there needs to be clarity on the definition of the process and where the children are sitting in that process, and then communicated that to the principal so there is one understanding.
What exactly a list is, so. The list
It may not be specified.
Through you, Chair, I'm happy to take that back. I do think that, even on our own team, we have different interpretations of what it means. They have to work through referrals. A psychoeducational consultant cannot conduct an assessment without an active referral, which requires consent from families. Once that referral is put in and approved, there is a referral list that they work through. They have done an amazing job this year with increased levels of accountability and support to work through that list so that we're not seeing families wait. And so, Leanne, if that's the situation, I would say that improved communication to school-based principals around the language is something that we will share through, and I will take action on that I'm sure through the next meeting that the managers have with their team, we will have refined communication that we can share with principals on that.
Yeah, so principals are communicating
More clearly
and with the same language to the parents, and so it's a consistent.
Agree.
Yeah, consistent communication rather than one principal says this and the other principal says that, and then parents are, this parent talk, because parents talk to one another. And parents will hear one thing from one principal and go, well, my principal said this.
Chair, I don't want to
So there needs to be some consistency.
through your chair, so I don't want to lose my point. So I'd like to have a motion for the motion action log, to ask if staff could please bring us that number for the next SEAC meeting of how many students are awaiting psychological services, and how many students are waiting to find out if they will be tended to. Is that the way to put it? Without using the word list?
We would never be able to speak to the number of SRMs that are in discussion around that being the need, because we do send, as I shared already, we send schools back to make sure that before we get to that point of assessment that they've done their due diligence in the tiered interventions.
Sure.
We would never have a number for that,
Okay.
but we would have a number of the ones that have been accepted and referrals have been made.
Perfect. Let's do that.
I think what you're trying to say, trustee Elvis, is the funnel.
Exactly.
It's a number in the funnel and how many you're seeing and what's the delta, and because there is no one waiting for service. So then what does the funnel look like?
That is exactly, that is exactly my point. And I'm thinking of the parents that are wondering, and I want to be able to give them their answer. Thank you.
Yeah, because I would say, within the last 2 to 3 years, experience, when my children were at PDSB public school, they said, oh, like to actually get a psych ed assessment, it's going to take at least a year and a half.
Yeah, that was when the ACC was implemented. So we have to kind of almost, we're starting anew with this new process. It just started. I think it's important to kind of give it time to see what will happen. Yes, I think that needs to be communicated, that things have changed in the board, not only with staffing, but also the process. And it's just been kind of refined and implemented. Everybody's getting on board and doing what needs to be done. So I think by the end of the school year or September, there might be more information that can be that will be more importance to you as opposed to now, because things are just being refined and tweaked as being.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Wow. Well, we did have, again, we had a lot of questions, and obviously you see, but there's a lot of interest in this. So thank you very much. Trustee Valbus, would you like to receive that? Thank you. And Trustee Carter, that's it. Wonderful. Okay. Well, I think we're gonna move on to. Sorry, did somebody have any questions? We're gonna move on to communications for action or receipt. That's 8.1. That was the correspondence from the LVA. Oh, yeah, your correspondence. Did you want to look at this?
Oh, it's simply that I'm now the primary representative and Carol Ogilvy, our board president, is now the alternate.
Okay, thank you for that.
Very sure.
All right. That's 8.1. Sorry, move on to my 8.1. Okay, so we have somebody moved that the SEAC recommends the PDSB approves the appointment of Leanne Mallet as SEAC representative. So all in favor? We're all in favor. Chair's request for written questions, and I have none. Reports from representatives on councils and associations or questions asked of them by committee members. Say any of the committee members have anything more to say? Any more questions? Any more reports? I don't know if this is the right time to say it, but I've gone through a bit of a change at my work. My workplace has changed. You notice I haven't attended the past 2 meetings, and I've done some soul searching, and I'd like to thank everybody for their support, but I won't be running for chair next month. I'm willing to stay on as vice chair and be a mentor for the new chair, but I won't be running with chair next month. I've appreciated the amount of support that I've gotten from all the staff members and all the hard work that everybody puts in, all of our representatives and our trustees, and yeah, it's been an honor to be up here and chairing these meetings, and I've learned a lot about myself and a lot about education, and it's been wonderful, but it's time for me to step up. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, if I may, I've only been the superintendent of special education for 1.5 years now, but to work alongside of you has been a privilege. You approach every meeting with a sense of deep commitment to students. You are kind and compassionate and always encourage us to see the good and to see the potential in everybody, including each other. Your service has been tremendous to this board in the many, many years that you've been chaired, and we are highly indebted to you and thankful for you.
Thank you. Okay, we don't have any motions or petitions, but we do have the motion in action log, and we have a couple of additions.
Yep, through you, Chair. The first three items were already sent out via links and have been linked in there, and other ones are pending. There was a request to provide more detailed information on the learning that principals and vice principals went through. So on October 22nd, 23rd and 24th, we actually ran 3 days of learning. Our whole department ran full day learning sessions for the entire board. These were mandatory sessions that all principals had to attend. The topics included our special education priorities, learning on equity and anti-ableism, understanding special education roles and responsibilities, a review of their role in the student review process, making sure that individual education plans were done in a way that was really developmentally appropriate and supportive to students, understanding their role in the IPRCs, organizing a school with special education considerations. And this was one that was very well attended to make sure that they were putting the needs of students with disabilities first, looking at special education processes and programs, psychoeducational assessments. We talked about that. We talked about alternative learning environments again, a presentation that was brought to SEAC already, and the implementation of strong leadership actions for special education students. I've shared there what the learning goals of the session were, and for accountability, making sure accountability is key, as many of you say. Follow-up is key, because Stephen Katz says professional learning only is really learning if it makes a change in practice. Yeah. It's not just exposure to professional learning, but it's how has that learning implemented or changed what I'm going to do in my schools. And so we left participants with a tool for planning, implementing, and self-monitoring specific actions that they were required to do, and shared those tools with their superintendents to make sure that when superintendents are doing walkthroughs, school walkthroughs, they do them often, that they go through strategically and asking questions around special education programming. It's not just the SEAC goal for neurotypical students, but looking at, what am I understanding about what the program looks like for congregated classes, or for a student who is exceptional but in the mainstream, or those types of questions. So we provided superintendents with all those resources. And the ADHD writing team is in the final stage of review, and we hope to be bringing back this amazing work, which will include a website with resources, and we've included community members, including some who brought delegations to SEAC here, and wanted to make a correction. I did share that the ADHD learning was already released. It has not been released to educators yet, but it is being provided. So I just wanted to make that correction. So happy to answer any questions. I have more additions to the motion action log.
Does anybody have a question about the motion? Yes, Jennifer?
I'll be quick. Just a couple. So I see that we're postponing the EA absence unfilled rates again to next month. What's the hold up, and are we going to get it next month? This is like one of the biggest things that people are calling me about.
So through you, Chair, I wanted to invite executive. I don't master, but I don't know her title. I can't remember her title. But the manager of human resources to provide a more fulsome answer to that. And it is something that I know that we track, but I'll come back to you with an answer when we have a more fulsome answer. It has been something that we're looking at, though. And again, we are putting in supports and processes to make sure that our EA group is a highly important and valuable group on our board, and we really, really do value the work that they do, and we are continuing to track absences and seeing what we can do to make sure kids are being supported.
So yeah, we just want to see what that is, like, and how it's working. Is it improving it? Like, what's happening, right? Because from my experience and from what I hear from EAs and from students and from parents, is it's not improving. Okay, and we want to understand, like, what are we doing about it? This is one of our biggest issues. It's one of our biggest expenses in the special education department. I don't know if we want to maybe invite some EAs to have a discussion, what's going on. There you go. Yeah, I just think it's something that's been going on for a really long time, and
as a SEAC, I don't know about anyone else, but that's a big challenge for a lot of our parents, right? And a lot of our students, and they're, not being able to go to school, or not being treated with dignity in when they're in school because there's not enough staff around. So to wait, we asked for these numbers like last year in June, right? So I don't understand why that isn't something that's like front and center on your desk that you're monitoring.
So through you, Chair, the monitoring of absences is a responsibility of the Human Resources Department. For all absences, not just EA, but teacher absence, principal absence, superintendent absence is all monitored by that. So I'm reticent to answer a question that I don't have the data for nor the responsibility for, but certainly we'll bring that back.
I guess my it's impacting these students significantly.
Understood.
Okay, move on. Census data, can we have that based on our students with special needs? So versus maybe typical students. So when there's all those opinion or thoughts on like how they're feeling included and that kind of thing. The last time they did the census, they were able to break that into like, are our students with special needs trending similar to other students in the school? And have we improved since that? Now I know last census they said that was difficult to pull out. We were going to work to make that better and easier to pull out this time. So I'm really hopeful that's something we can get.
Yeah, through you, we did share the link to the outward facing data the report that went out through the board report. So we did share that with you. We can bring back to the research department to see if they can disaggregate, but I'm going to ask Associate Director Camille Logan to answer that question.
Through you, Chair, and I can't answer the question. However, I can just share that we are now developing the process to begin working on the upcoming census. So perhaps there are things that we can think about in order to enhance and to be able to make it easier for the next round in order to be able to do so. So definitely our researcher can perhaps try and get some of those answers to you as best as possible. But then going forward, we are starting to plan for the engagement of the upcoming student census and developing that. So maybe these are things that we can think of in advance that might be able to help.
So I've been here for a while for 3 census, and we did actually have these challenges in the last. I'm hoping that the data is easy to pull out because we did have those discussions in the past. So hopefully you'll come back to me and say, yes, here it is. Great. And my last question, so long on the training, is it possible to actually see the specific training, like specifically on equity and anti-ableism or in organizing a school, like actually see what is it you're sharing with the teachers? I think the people around this room could really offer some input to that kind of thing, lived experiences and their students, that kind of thing.
So through you, Chair, I believe that would lead into kind of operational items. We're certainly happy to share big ideas, but we do significant amounts of training. I cannot tell you the amount of training that we have done. So for us to bring training back, we do training for EA groups, we do training for educators, we do training for administrators, superintendents. So that ask is not a realistic one, if I'm being honest. But certainly if you feel like there is resources and or areas that we could ensure that we cover, we're always happy to hear that and make sure that that's covered. But we do talk a lot about anti-ableism in our work and making sure that we remove the barriers that are existing.
So the reality from the ground level is that that's not really changing. So I'd like to understand what it is we're teaching specifically around those ideas, and maybe we can help facilitate that and make it better, because honestly, the students that I represent, it's not changing. It's not getting any better. They're being discriminated against. They're being excluded on a regular basis. So I think you should take advantage of some of the experience you have around the table and your students to try and help change that mentality. So by not understanding what you're actually sharing with teachers, it's really hard for us to help to improve that, because right now it's not improving, at least from my group of people that I represent.
Yeah, and through you, Chair, we do have a high number of staff in our department with lived experience that help develop the resources.
So we have some data on like how are we tracking? Because from the ground, I mean, things take time to change, but we're not seeing change. So how are we ensuring that what we're doing is working?
Through you, Chair, that was one of the goals of the pilot program and the accountability and monitoring tool that we're creating in alignment with SEAC. And as Superintendent Sparrow said, we're one of the only boards that's really tracking progress in congregated classes. So we're hoping after the pilot that's happening, starting now, that we'll have more concrete data around improvements. Understanding that data for some congregated classes is not going to look like a percentage or a number. It's going to look like observations, like you said, observations, conversations with families, and making sure that experiences are improving and that we're seeing, stronger pathways towards independence. Which is, again, reflected in our commitment in the hiring that we've done with transition navigators and IEP coordinators. We are very committed to getting the root of the work into classrooms.
I just have one last question. Referring to the census and developing a census for this year now. I couldn't recall, I know I did the census last year, but I can't recall if there was exceptionality specific questions. Like, was there a filter? Like, was there like an option for me to identify my son or my child or my daughter has this exceptionality, and then input responses based on like their social or emotional learning in the census?
Through you, Chair, and I don't have the survey in front of me in order to be able to answer that question specifically. So I think it's likely best that we see if we can do the disaggregation, and then B, take the information forward. And I imagine that as the questions are going to be developed, the SEAC is one that will be engaged in having an opportunity to be in consultation with the development, which I'm sure you've had that experience in the past where the research department comes and runs through some questions, or you'll have an opportunity to see the questions and have an opportunity to provide feedback. So we're just at the very development stages in terms of developing things and moving forward and doing a plan, but there will be a consultation plan, and SEAC will definitely have an opportunity to provide input into elements of the questions as in the past.
And I do believe there were opportunities with multiple opportunities to self-identify within the
absolutely,
and also to identify all the intersectionalities.
Yeah, we look at all the different demographics, but I just don't know if you're asking about specific things, and I don't know the specifics. So,
and I'm asking because it seems like the census data then informs like the SEAC plan, other plans, and so if it's such a critical component in informing those plans, and then tracking the year over year improvement or lack of whatever, then I think it's critical, and we have an opportunity to ask very pointed questions, because otherwise parents might not know where to put the feedback.
Absolutely. But again, it's best to have the conversation and the discussion with a member of the research team who understands and knows the design of the research questions, and they also have to follow what is also part of the provincial criteria around identifying identities as well. So there's all kinds of parameters as well, but they can explain that far better than I can. So
For you, Chair, we can certainly put that as a report. So working in consultation with the research department, we can bring that back as one of the reports based on their projected timelines. I'm not sure what they are, but we can bring that.
And with that, Jazzy, would you like to move her?
Yeah.
And we have, and again, yeah, thank you very much, everybody.